I apologize for being a little bit late. I hope you can hear me. I didn't check that, but I hope you can hear me. Uh, I'm a little bit late because I wanted to make sure that I got this important video clip involved in this. But I just want to start with talking to you guys about what's going on. I think it's really important. I hate to call an episode I told you so, but I'm really starting to feel like that's where we're at. So let me just pull on and start talking to you. When kids are used for politics, this is a history lesson schools aren't teaching. Today in my own district, multiple kids were outside protesting. Now, a lot of parents thought that was great. It was stunning. They were using their voices. They should be heard with their own thoughts. Okay, but what are their own thoughts? How much are they regurgitating based on what they're seeing on social media, what they're hearing in the classroom, and honestly, what they're hearing at home? And I want to tell you from the very beginning, I'm concerned about this, whether it is on the right or the left. Kids protesting should be a concern for all of us. And the reason why is because we are repeating history. So today in school, kids walked out of school. Adults on the left were praising them for doing the right thing. But right now means whatever the adults, and I'm using that word loosely, approve of. These kids are told that they are educating people. The truth is that they are afraid and their fear is being used. And this is something that has happened over and over and over again in history. I teach high schoolers, and we had this conversation. The thing that stopped me, made me pause in our lesson this week, was when the kids, I asked them a very simple question: Are people more united? Do they come together based on what unites them, or do they come together because they find a common enemy? And the kids, these are high schoolers, they said a common enemy throughout history. And I said, yes, throughout history, but what about America? And we had to come to the place of realizing that this is new in America. We used to be about what unites us, but today it is about whatever the side wants to believe. And a ton of this comes down to propaganda. So they're told that they're friends. These kids are so afraid because they're being told that their friends are taken away. And I live in a more rural community. Granted, it is turning more and more progressive by the day. I really hope people will hear that. But I live in a rural community, which means that we have a lot of migrant workers, which means we have a lot of Mexicans in our community. So I understand why kids are afraid that their friends are going to be taken away. But what they're not being is based in reality. They're not being shown the facts. Their emotions are being used, and that's important. Kids don't even yet understand civic responsibility. Remember, they're not old enough to vote. And quite frankly, I would say a lot of adults don't understand civic responsibility. Because, see, in that term is the word responsibility, which means that you should know what both sides are saying. That's really important. And our kids don't. Our kids, they react based on their brain. They have this biological thing where their brain isn't developed yet, which is why we should keep some things away from them. They have population, so they've got this fear of mass events, war, disaster. Again, some of the things that our kids are being taught regularly in the classroom are already being reversed. Things that we were told were an absolute fact, you couldn't question it, are already being reversed. But unfortunately, our young children have been told that they need to fear the earth is about to end. And so they live in a constant state of fear, and they also live in a constant state of stimuli. where they're regularly looking at their social media and whoever they follow is telling them the things that they should think and the things that they should say. And as parents say, this is so stunning and brave, I was watching signs that said, F ice. And again, if you don't know this, I live in Utah. I live in a very religious state. And to watch middle school kids have signs with the F word on them, I'm just not sure how we set that as right. So our kids don't have emotional maturity, which means, and there were two things that I saw that made me go, was not planning on making a video because I'm doing an interview in the morning. So was not planning on doing this. But two things. One, when I was coming back from a trip this weekend, I saw that in a town close to me, about 10 minutes away, there was a protest. And in this protest, there was a counter protest. Now, you guys, you have to understand that, especially with kids, all right, they're reacting to emotion. So the second thing that I saw was in Issaquah, which is close, it's about 20 minutes from the town that I came from in Washington state. A mother walked out and tried to kind of see what was going on, and she was attacked by kids. And the kids were not held accountable because they're just kids. And this is an extremely useful tactic. So kids are the most emotionally driven, the least informed, and sadly and honestly, people should feel ashamed. Honestly, the easiest to manipulate. So now I'm going to give you a history lesson, just like I would give my own students. I'm going to give you a history lesson on how in the past kids have been manipulated. So we're going to start with this image here. And this is Mao's Cultural Revolution, otherwise known as the Color Revolution in China in the 1960s. I want you to look closely at how young some of these kids are. Look at this young one right here. These are kids. Does this look a whole lot different? And what they're carrying is a little red book that tells them exactly what they're supposed to believe and how they're supposed to behave and what makes them a good person. That's all right here. And in the process of this, I'm going to show you what some other dictators did in terms of using children. And I just want you to think, what looks familiar? Does this look familiar? Does the hand up in the air look familiar? I think it does. Do the little books that tell them exactly the right way to behave look familiar? Yes, we have curriculum that is now teaching our kids the exact way to be a good person. And if you aren't that kind of good person, well, then you're disposable. I will get into that a little bit later as well. Let me just give you an example of the first killing under Mao. And I'm going to butcher this name, but it's Bian Xinghong, I think, was the first educator killed by students during the Cultural Revolution, beaten to death by the Red Guards on August 5th. Now, these kids only had permission to start being violent in the spring. I believe it was June. So we're talking 3 months before violence escalated. And that is what I saw when I saw the thing about the two counter arguments. And I've heard lovely people who I really respect saying, I'm so glad that there was a counter. Until we're not. Until we're not. Until, I don't know, one piece of ice hits another person in the face and there becomes a big bloody mess. Until towns are forced to choose between this or this. And you're afraid to look your neighbor in the eye because they might be on the other side. Does that seem at all familiar to you? But see, the thing is that the last time, for the most part, we sheltered our kids from it. And now we're using them. So beaten to death by Red Guards. The Red Guards were the young, the youth, who were mobilized to get rid of the four olds, which is old customs, old cultures, old religion, and old tradition. I believe I have so much of this going on in my head, and last week I did Cambodia, so I think that that's correct. Anybody, if I've got that wrong, please put it in the comments. As the party secretary and vice principal, she was targeted after Mao Zedong encouraged young people to revolt against authority. Again, please think about the chaos in our classrooms. Think about the teachers who have their hands tied behind their back by something that you might not know is called restorative justice, which really does neuter the teacher and says you have to put up with a whole lot of stuff. And if you send a child to the office, they may come back with a lollipop and look at you like, nice try. This is now in policy called restorative justice. I encourage you to look it up. I encourage you, if you're a parent, not a child, to look up the book Why Meadow Died. It will explain to you what's going on in our schools and what's been going on and how we got to a point where we have shootings and how we got to a point where we have shootings and we're paying for the defense. I just hope that you will let that sink in. All right. So our kids are being manipulated by language. The only thing more powerful than hate is love sounds wonderful, doesn't it? Except when hate means anyone who disagrees with you is hateful. Now, today, and I'm sorry if you don't like him, you don't appreciate him, but today is 5 months since Charlie Kirk was killed. And if it bothers you to acknowledge that a man was killed in Utah 5 months ago, then you might be the one who has more of a problem with hate, because I don't. I wouldn't want to see that happen to anyone. But I definitely think that the people who would justify that, and I want to be clear here because I've got students who are telling me that they're getting memes of this man's head being blown off. And it's a laughing matter for our kids. Is that kindness? Is that some sort of source of strength? That our kids are mocking the death of a man because of his words, right? Because you'll never have found anywhere that this man was a violent man, except for when you change violence to include words that you don't like. And if you can do that for a stranger that you've only seen on social media, what are you going to do when the kid in your class says something you don't like? And it has been justified. And see, this is this thing that they would do. I'm going to show you a short video, very, very short in a moment. But what they would do is they would say the special kids get to come here and the special kids, well, they get to be allies. And I'm pausing on these words because they're words that are currently in our schools. Last year, a student who was very upset at her teacher decided to take a picture of some of the things in the teacher's classroom in Payson. And one of them was how to be a bathroom ally. So our children are political pawns. And what that meant was that you are supposed to be a girl who will protect a biological male in the bathroom if other girls feel uncomfortable. See, so whenever you are taught that your kindness allows you to hate or bully another group, and again, I don't care what side this is on because I care about the human soul far more than I care about right or left. But whenever you are taught that you get to bully another group, and it is not bullying to say, you know what, I'm not interested in that. I'm not going to do that. That's not bullying. But to shame, to mock, to physically assault, and to be allowed to do it, we are there. That is happening. Just this week in Salt Lake County, kids stood outside and threw things at trucks, and not ice trucks. They threw things at trucks. They've busted school bus windows. And the attitude seems to be kids will be kids. But what you're doing is you're putting them in this boiling pot, and you're never, ever telling them no. And why not? Because you want them to be pawns. Do you know, in Minnesota, they will say things like, go out and use your bodies. A lot of activists use terms like bodies because that's all they see. And with adults, if you make those decisions, you make those decisions. But using our kids is something very, very different. So I'm going to show you what some of our kind people are saying. Now, this is not in our state, but it is kids. And I did my best with to cut things down. Oh, it's not going to let me show you the picture there. So you probably saw it for a brief moment. I'll try again. I don't know. We'll see if it'll work. Nope, it won't show it. Okay. So in this picture, it is a text thread of a group of kids that are about to protest. And they openly say, I hope the president loses his effing head. I can't wait for him to be shot in the head. Those are our kind kids talking, right? This is the kindness that we want for the next generation. So I want to show you, if I can get to it, I want to show you this video. Let's see. I'm a little lost in these things, so let me see. I hope I'm getting this. Please let me know if you cannot see it. Oh, wait, I think I did something wrong. I didn't hit share screen. Okay. Oh. Okay. I'm going to hit add new, hopefully, and share screen. We'll see if this works. Please let me know if you don't see it. I'm going to come over here and hit. Okay. I just want you to watch this little bit of a video, and I'm going to talk you through it because I don't know if you can see.
Children became little Octoberists, named after the Bolshevik officer.
So these kids are between the ages of 7 and 9. These are the little Octoberists.
Pioneered at age 9 the Communist Children's Organization.
This is
Those who qualified could join the Communist Youth, the Komsomol, at age 14. These organizations reinforced children's duties as Soviet citizens, as well as the ideology of Marxist-Leninist communism. All of the children and youth who joined these organizations were expected to be avowed atheists. Conformity was essential.
Okay, perfect. I hope you saw that. I'm going to look in my, oops, that's not what I want. I'm going to look over here and see in my notes or in my chat if anybody has seen that. Oh. So what I was showing was a piece of a video from Julie Bailing's film, Beneath Sheep's Clothing. And in it, she talks about what happened in Russia. They had the little Octoberists. The little Octoberists were kids between the ages of 7 and 9, pretty much as soon as children could be taken out of their parents' care. All right. There are a lot of people who feel that it is a mother's right and that we should all have equality. So every mother should work, not has the choice to work, but should work. And ultimately what that means is they want to get kids out of the household and into their centers of their education as quickly as possible. In Cambodia, which I just did an interview with Seek Smith of Mom Army last week. In Cambodia, what they would do with the moms to make sure that they had the equal rights to work is they would take their children and take them to the killing tree. You can imagine what that is. I'm not going to show any graphics because I do want this to be something that young people can watch and should watch, quite frankly. So they would take these moms and make sure that they were able to work. Today, we have people who want full time, all the time state care, cradle to the grave. They want socialism in Utah. There are people who do not, in fact, they detest the ability to homeschool because they want socialism in Utah. And the goal is always, first and foremost, to remove families, to separate the role of families. So I'm going to take you through a list of, I can find my list of things that is not it. I want to take you through a list of the things that Stalin did. So I'm just going to pull up for a moment kids of political movements. I'm going to pull up the things. This is all of my notes, excuse me. I hope you can see them. So Stalin started with the young pioneers. This is not new. Children as young as 11, they were taught that God was outdated. They were encouraged to report their own families. Loyalty shifted from parents to state, and it always starts with an enemy. What is the enemy? Well, in this case, for them, it was wealth. So let me come back here again and talk to you a little bit about wealth and what that meant in Russia. And I want you, if you are a child, if you're a family, I want you to think about your home. Maybe you love your home. Maybe it is your dream home. Maybe it's not that great, but it suffices. Maybe you want more. What they would do, and in Julie's film, there's a woman that gets interviewed with this, is that if you had a house slightly smaller than somebody else, you were considered wealthy. And the villagers would come to your home and take everything you have. Now, what happens and then they would take your family and make them live on the street. And they would take your fathers and put them in jail. That's history. So they would take these people, they were called the kulaks, and they would put them in the gulag. And then the family would be left to starve simply because of envy. So we created this within our kids. We created this wheel of what's called privilege and power. And many kids have seen it, not all of them have. But the wheel of privilege and power tells you who is oppressed and who is not oppressed. The goal of what we're doing right now with our kids is creating a proletariat group of young people. A proletariat group. Can you name a revolution other than the American, which had its own bloody war, but other revolutions of any time that have not been millions of people slaughtered because of envy and because of misrepresentation? So our kids start to get this misrepresentation in school in about 5th grade when they get something called digital media literacy. Digital media literacy begins to control their minds because it begins to tell them what they are not allowed to listen to, what makes them a bad person if they listen to it. And they don't say a bad person, they say harm and safety. In cultural revolutions, including now, there are places that are being taken over now where they will scream the prayer, they'll blast the prayer loudly 3 times a day, and it doesn't matter if you believe it or not, you still have to listen. And that is a more gentle version of, what a revolution looks like. But for our kids, and I think a lot of people justify what they're doing because it's not as harmful as, say, Cambodia, picking up kids, putting them in trucks, leaving them, separating them from their families, and blasting all day the new rules, the new laws while they're working. And then in the evening, they have to go and have a struggle session. And so do we. Do you not think it's a struggle session? Do you not think that there is some shame Imagine being one of the few kids who's not out protesting and you're sitting in a classroom, and maybe you're sitting in a classroom with some teacher that you know would admire you a whole lot more if you were out there. Do you not see how that could be a struggle session? How that could eat at the social success, eat at the mind of these kids? These kids want to be liked, they want to be respected, they want to matter, but they only get to matter if they have the right ideas. This is nothing short of abuse. So I want to take you to CNN, which gives our kids the news from CNN. Okay, what they're not going to show, and this is important for our kids to understand. If you are a child, you need to understand this. ICE generally picks up illegals who have committed crimes. Now, all of this stuff about what President Trump is doing is propaganda. Now, there are two circumstances in which I want you to think about if you've heard of them. One is Alex Preddy. Alex Preddy, they twisted his image so much that even after he died, they made him look what they would consider more attractive. If a person is really worth it, if a person really has value, do you fix them up before telling their story? Now, there's a difference between a protest, which many of you did, where you stood outside and held your signs, and maybe, hopefully, you did it peacefully if you chose to do it. But you were doing it for something that maybe you should have seen the rest of the footage. When I teach in my class, especially when I'm teaching high schoolers, I try to show them both sides of something. If the kids come to me and say, hey, that guy deserved to die because he wasn't a very good person and this is what he said, then I say, okay, let's sit, let's pull it up, let's watch the whole thing. When people said that Elon Musk did the certain salute, I pulled up the whole thing and I let my students make the decision for themselves. I don't even tell them. They'll say, Mrs. B, I think you'll tell us the truth. And I'll say, no, I'll show you so that you can make your own decisions, because that's where you're at. If you're in high school, you should be a sponge who wants to get as much information as possible. But our social media and our education plans have ripped that away from so many of you. And you should demand it back. You want to talk about something worth using your voice for? You should demand it back. You should say, I want the whole truth. I don't want to be a pawn, which is what oftentimes happens. So let's take a look at this. These are the ice removals. And these are, if you can see the little rainbow here, this is not right-wing media by any means, okay? And I intentionally chose that because I think it's important that you see. Barack Obama, who you guys, if you're a kid, you're going to be too young to even recognize. Barack Obama had deportation numbers that earned him the nickname Deporter in Chief. But because he was the first Black president, which he's actually biracial, but everybody calls him the first Black president, it couldn't be questioned. Now, this is the behavior of a dictator when you cannot question. So many people think that the current president is a dictator, but do you know what that means? Because when a dictator, just gonna pull up my notes. That is not it. Might be that. I'm having a little issue here, so just wait for me, please. There we go. Okay. When a dictator decides that they don't like something, that something's against them, they shut it down immediately. And by shut it down, I mean they arrest people, put them in jail, throw away the key, or they kill them. So you need to think about it. Were you able to stand outside peacefully and even have the police say we support your right to do so? Then you don't have a dictator. But see, this language is super, super important because it manipulates you. So I want to go back to the idea of kindness because that when kindness is only for some people, and this is something that Utah really loves. Utah even has like an award for the kindest school. But kindness comes with exceptions. You're told it's okay to hate the intolerant, it's okay to mock, it's okay to dehumanize, to see a person as less than human. Hate doesn't start with fists. It starts with permission. And we created this. We created this in our let us tell children how to be kind. Let me tell you, as somebody who educates kids, I see 87 kids a week, and those kids are genuinely kind. Now, do they have squabbles with each other? Sure. But overall, and especially in my class when I'm constantly trying to foster that humanity, I see the beauty of young people. In my high school class, they don't agree. In fact, some of them call it the arguing class, and they're not really arguing, but they don't agree. They have very strong opinions from this side and everywhere in the middle. In fact, that's how I run my class. I make statements, they move around and say agree, disagree, and then they expand on why. And we respectfully listen to each other. And we have always known that that is the way to do it. But now we say, don't say anything that might hurt someone's feelings. That's not what's going on. It's not that you're not supposed to say anything that's not going to hurt anyone's feelings, because I promise you, there are a group of people who feel silenced and that hurts their feelings. Instead, you are not supposed to say anything that goes against the accepted rhetoric. And that's not just for kids, but it does start with them. So, digital media literacy, which you have to have in order to graduate, challenges what kids or what you're supposed to do, or what we want you to do is to challenge what kids are taught to ignore. You're told, don't watch that. That source is bad. And it's not because it's inappropriate, but because it challenges a narrative. Did you know that a couple of years ago, there were several people who've escaped socialism? They're asylum seekers. If you don't know what an asylum seeker is, I highly recommend that you look. So they're asylum seekers. And that means that they've been through something really hard and they have left their country, oftentimes with fear of death or imprisonment. So these asylum seekers went to Utah, the all American religious state, and said, we think our kids should be taught communism. They should be taught about communism. They should be taught, quite frankly, the horrors of communism and socialism. And a group of Utah's elected officials said, no, the kids don't need to know that. There will be a time, and there will be, because like I said, there are people who want Utah to be socialists. And when we get there, which isn't that far if we don't start having these kind of conversations with our kids, when we get there, then they will sorry, when we get there, then they'll say, yes, it's time to learn about socialism because it will be your only choice. And so I was watching a little clip today of a guy talking about how wonderful communism is, and if we all understood it, we would all want it. But I want you to think, if you own a business, or if you've got grandparents who own a business, because in communism they dig deep into your history. Now, mind you, I am a minority and not rich and started life extremely poor. So, if I was a self whatever grifter, I wouldn't say a thing to you guys because I will benefit greatly from socialism. Except I know what socialism is, and I know that no one benefits greatly, except for maybe, the top of the top. But the majority is that no one benefits greatly. And I think also the personal guilt and the eating of your soul is not something that I think we should be pushing. So you aren't supposed to watch things because it's inappropriate, but because it challenges a narrative. Have you ever thought about why we know about Hitler, but not Mao, Stalin, or Pol Pot? Because we need one common enemy. Now, there's no way in the world that you're going to hear me saying anything good about Mr. Adolf, but his numbers are less than Mao's. And we don't hear about it because you are supposed to think that communism is a good idea. So when information is hidden, it's never for your protection. When people say, no, we're not going to teach the kids about communism in school, there's a woman and there's a great book that families should read, and it's called Red Scarf Girl. And honestly, as soon as this is over, get on Amazon and get that book. And if you want, I would be happy to do a book club with kids. But she begged for them to be able to read that in school. And she's a teacher, and they said no. And if you saw it, I did this with some of my students. I said, I want you to highlight anything that you see that's similar to today. So in immigration, the stories that you're not told would slow down that hyper emotional narrative. That little boy, Liam, his dad left him. Were they supposed to just leave him in the car? And how about the story of all of the victims who are your ages? There are several images of young people, young girls who are assaulted and killed, but you're not allowed to say any of their stories because it doesn't fit the narrative. Because in a cultural revolution, one side is right all the time and one side is wrong all the time. And if that's what your mind is starting to make you think, oh, I couldn't talk to those people. I can't be friends with that person. Oh, then somebody is teaching you. You're literally being taught to hate. Compassion without truth creates more victims. There's a whole bunch of other ways in which you can be a victim of purely open borders. And I'm going to leave that one at that. Here's the thing that you guys are being taught, and it's important that you understand it. It's called oikophobia. And I know I sound super smart for knowing this word. And I talked to a teacher the other day and he had to look it up. He's like, I've never heard of that word, but yes, that's exactly what's happening. Oikophobia means the fear or loathing of your homeland. Now, I want to show you, I want to take you mentally into cultural revolutions that are currently happening in the UK, in the Netherlands, although the Netherlands is kind of putting a stop to it and saying no more. But beforehand, they were like, oh, we're so bad. Oh, we're so homogenous. Homogenous means we all look the same. We're so homogenous. We all look the same. We must not even know it and be racist. So let's open up the doors and let anybody in. And we can't ask questions when they come in. We can't ask, oh, did they come because a mental hospital was opened up? Did they come to just take our stuff, but they don't actually love us or want to be a part of our culture? Why'd they come? You're not allowed to ask it because that makes you racist. So you keep your mouth shut and people come in. And what happened is that they decided to put a bunch of students and a bunch of immigrants. I don't even know if they're illegal in this situation, but they put them all into a housing unit. And many of the girls were assaulted. So you can be so empathetic. And this is important. Empathy is a word that people are constantly saying, oh, we need to teach the kids to be more empathetic. No, we don't. And I'm a very kind-hearted person, but you don't have to teach the kids to be more empathetic. You need to teach them to be sympathetic. You need to teach them to go, oh, I feel bad for that person. I wonder if there's something I could do to help, but not, can I lay down on the ground and let them kick me? It's like that little story, The Giving Tree. You have to preserve what's yours first. And the crazy thing is that a lot of people who push that other idea, they don't live like the people they're asking, they're demanding have to live like that. So what will happen is that in the inner city, in a primarily ghetto, and yes, primarily African American Black neighborhood, that's where the immigrants will go, and they will completely take over. They will take over their schools, in their gyms. They'll put them in there and have them sleeping in there, so then their kids don't have a place to play, and they don't care. So again, we're being taught to be compassionate for some people, but not for others, and that's not true compassion. I When I have the opportunity, I help asylum seekers. If I've heard their stories, if I see their love and their need to be here, I help them. That might mean I write letters to legislators. It might mean I'm just their friend. But I feel very differently about that than people who come just to take. And the idea that you can't ask that question and that we tell our kids not to ask that question is how we use them as pawns. So for our children, and this has been happening, I know this happened because, well, I think my son was in 3rd grade. Um, he was told, or he came home and he goes, "Mom, America's not any better than any other country." And that's how it's framed. But if you talk to legal immigrants, they will tell you a very different story. And you need to ask, how come those people aren't coming and talking in our schools? Because there's a lot of them, and there's a lot of them very, very willing, and there's a lot of them right here. Kiddos, sorry, I'm using that word, but I use it. So, students, if you know somebody from another country who came here, listen to their story. Okay, so our kids are being taught that we're no better than anywhere else, that we're fundamentally evil, that no one is illegal on stolen land, which means they're not even learning about the Louisiana Purchase or how we got Mexico. That we're undeserving of borders, that we're too privileged. I wish, I just think it's ethically wrong, but I wish I could take a picture of all of the people who work with Better Boundaries and Mormon Women for Ethical Government and just kind of give you a glimpse of their lives, but yet the way that they want others to live and that they demand others to live. It's it's interesting. Cultural revolutions, they always destroy history. That's the first thing. So they revise history. So you will hear a story and you're like, that's not the story I heard before. And maybe, because I always tell my students, I am going to tell you as much truth as I have because I wasn't there. But I'm going to tell you as much truth as I have. But everybody has an agenda. But when you see Anne Boleyn as an African American, Or Cleopatra, the same. That's revised history. That is history with an intention of purposely getting your kids to not know the truth. So, they take away your history, which also takes away your pride. I'll throw this one out. When places are conquered, they change their flags. They take away art and turn it into something ugly. They take away faith. A lot of times, the dictator literally becomes God. And if you want to do some pictures, go Google some images of former presidents being made to look like saints. There's probably some of, Mr. Trump as well, but I've not seen those. I've also not looked. Um, they take away your faith. Right now, there is a court case in Maine, in America, where a mother cannot take her daughter to church, even though her daughter wants to go to church, because a father who was never in the picture sued her with the ACLU. And now she cannot take her daughter to church in America. That's where we are, under the name of who knows what. Inclusion for the father who wasn't there. But taking away or reframing what religion is, saying that you're only a Christian if you do things exactly like this, and then looking at that exactly like, and looking at your own scriptures and going, well, that's nothing like what my scriptures say. And they're like, that's fine, just throw away your scriptures. We're telling you now how to be Christian. So in Russia, what they did is they said the verse, goodness, about the dove, be wise as a serpent, gentle as a dove. They changed it because they realized they couldn't take the people with their deep, deep faith. So instead, they put new pastors in who would teach the new state religion. And so instead of saying, be wise as a serpent, gentle as a dove, they said, be gentle as a dove, gentle as a dove, gentle as a dove. In other words, be weak and a doormat. Sound familiar? How many churches today do you see that are a bunch of women who have very, very strongly different views than what you grew up with? And they encourage you to deconstruct and to adopt ideas that are not what you know to be true. It is an attack on truth. And then there's identity. And you guys, this is old as the beginning of time. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they had different names. And then they were taken for their families and raised by the state, which gave them fully different identities. And when they decided that they would not fall to those identities, they faced massive repercussions. Does it not sound familiar? So people who hate their home will accept anything to replace it. So I want to talk to you about your rights as children, all right? Or your children's rights. These things must be an adult responsibility. And I know if this is the first time that you're seeing this, you may very well believe that I caused Furrygate and Payson 2 years ago. I did not. My view is always that you protect the kids and that the parents stand. You'll see behind me the state of things, Utah Moms for America, of which I'm the director. I always believe in empowering the parents. However, in this case, it is important that students know what's going on so that they can recognize it. I've had teachers say, I wouldn't have known what was going on if I didn't watch you. So it's oftentimes couched in kindness. But our kids don't have, their brains are simply not mature. Even the most responsible one, they're usually just regurgitating TikTok and they sound responsible. Trust me, I've got one of those. So this has to be an adult responsibility. Protesting is legal, absolutely, but responsibility requires maturity. An adult should protest, not students. You have no idea what kind of violence. I want you to think again. Kids throwing ice bricks. One gets one kid, maybe one gets one in the eye. A bunch of other kids start pummeling each other. Is that far off? How about the teachers who support it? And now they've got a very clear thing of who does and who doesn't. I can promise you that's a real thing because I have access to a curriculum book that shows the teachers that they're supposed to judge based on who's accepting their brainwashing and who's not. By brainwashing, I mean ethnic studies. Ethnic studies has two parts. I will say this in every video. The first part is to teach your child why they are oppressed. Do you have a big, beautiful house with a big, beautiful family? Do you love your big, beautiful spouse and your and have a big, beautiful legacy? Well, your kids are going to be taught, even in that circumstance, why they're oppressed. And if they don't get the easy ones, if they don't get the I'm a minority, well, then they're going to go into other things. And sadly, some of those other things become the most violent. There is a common thread between all of these shooters, these would-be and successful assassins. Don't let it be yours. Protesting is legal, but responsibility requires maturity. Adults should protest, not children. And there's also much more effective ways to advocate. Removing parent-child bonds is always intentional. Do you have a youth center in your area? Maybe, likely, the people who started it thought they were starting it off with something good, but I will promise you that I have watched hundreds of videos about how kids get caught up in the queer LGBTQ stuff. And I'm not here to judge that. I'm only here to judge that word queer, which means rejection of the normal. That's all. The rest of it means nothing but to constantly reject the normal. Currently, I'm reading Saul Alinsky's, well, not his book. I'm reading a book called Rules for Radicals Defeated. I'm going to start a book club on that. But in it, it talks about how Saul believes two things. He practices dualism. So if it's on his side, even if he's listening to the devil, it's good because it's what he wants. And anybody against it is evil. And my friends, so many people believe this. Saul Alinsky, Rules for Radicals, many educators have. The head of the, I want to say AFT, but anyways, there's two heads. Both of them are, in my opinion, extremely, I'll say extremely judgmental, which will make me sound judgmental. But Randy Weingarten has a book called Why Fascists Hate Teachers. That's where you're sending your kids. And Becky Pringle wants all the things to be for everybody except for your average, normal, normie person. So please don't think that it's only extremists that they're after. When someone asks, okay, so removing parent-child bonds is always intentional. When someone asks your child who their special adult is other than their parents, that's not accidental. And I know it happens because my niece called me at Salem and said, Auntie, I told them that you were my favorite person, and she thought I would feel good. And I did feel, I like being somebody's favorite, but I also recognize what it is. It's separating that bond intentionally. Kids deserve innocence. They should not be pawns in this mess. They deserve education, not propaganda. They deserve truth, all of it. I have a little thing in my classroom. I have a thing of licorice, and I say, if I taught something and you went home and you were like, I think she got that wrong, and you go to your parents and you say, I think she got that wrong, and you guys discuss it and you come back and you can prove to me that I got it wrong, because guess what? I'm only an educator. I can get things wrong. I can make mistakes. I don't know everything. Then you get a piece of licorice, because the truth matters, all of it. History doesn't repeat exactly, but the patterns are unmistakable. And here's the thing, I so appreciate you. I'm going to check and see if any of you wrote in the comments. If you did, thank you. If you didn't, thanks for watching. Thanks for sticking with me. But personally, I'm going to spend every breath I have helping families recognize these patterns, because our children should never be used. They should never be erased or sacrificed for someone else's agenda. Let me take a look at the chats. I do not see anything in the chat, so I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much for watching. Tomorrow, I have an interview with a critical thinker. His name is Will Roosh, and he teaches kids to think critically. I'm really excited for that conversation. It will be at 10 a.m. sharp. And please share this. Please share this. And please look into a few other people. Look into Xi Van Fleet. I have several interviews with people who've escaped communism. Carlos Moreno is right here in Utah. I've got friends who can't tell their stories yet. But Xi Van Fleet, parents, if you want to know more and you have the stomach for it, I highly recommend Julie Bailing's Beneath Sheep's Clothing. She has interviewed experts, both nationally and internationally, and she explains how this stuff gets into our schools as well as our churches. All right, my friends, I need to go to sleep because I've got an interview in the morning. Have a great one. Bye.